They say a house holds its history in the walls, but mine had a tendency to fight back. I just wrapped up a year-long renovation project on the Caldwell family estate, an imposing, century-old Victorian that looked like it had been ripped straight out of a haunted house brochure. Peeling wallpaper, creaky staircases, and a front porch that sagged like it was holding secrets it didn't want to share. It was a relic, sure, but it was my relic now. And after a lifetime of being told what I couldn't do with my body, my career, or my choices, this house was my rebellion in architectural form. Wide archways designed for easy wheelchair navigation. Lowered counters that didn't require me to stretch until my joints screamed. A hydrotherapy tub that Ethan called the adult version of a Hot Wheels track. Every detail was deliberate, practical, and, most importantly, ours. Enter my father, Frank Caldwell, master of unsolicited opinions and the king of practical thinking, which usually meant dismissing any idea that wasn't his own. He hadn't seen the house since I'd inherited it and started turning it into something that didn't actively try to maim its occupants. And after weeks of dodging his comments about how Victorians aren't meant for modern nonsense, he finally agreed to come see it. The plan was simple. Civil. He'd meet Scout, the foster pup Ethan, and I were trying to rehome, take a stroll around the block, and grab lunch like a normal family outing. What could possibly go wrong, right? He arrived 10 minutes early, which in Frank Caldwell language meant, I'm here to inspect, not visit. He stood in the doorway, eyes darting from the widened door frames to the lowered kitchen island like he was about to call the Historical Preservation Society. Wow, he muttered, stepping over the threshold like the floor might give out under his judgment. Didn't realize you were converting this place into a rehab center. I gritted my teeth. It's called accessible design, Dad. People are doing it everywhere now. You know, so their homes work for them, not against them. He grunted but said nothing. That was his version of waving the white flag, at least for the moment. The house tour felt more like a trial. Each feature I proudly showed off got the same squint of disapproval. The automatic cabinet lifts? Too gimmicky. The zero-threshold shower? Looks like a gym locker room. By the time we got to the kitchen, he stood by the drop-down counter section and tapped it with his knuckles like he was knocking on a coffin lid. You really think this is going to hold resale value? I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. I'm not designing for resale value, Dad. I'm designing for living value. That got me the patented Caldwell exasperation sigh, followed by a change of subject to Scout. Thank heavens. For a blissful 40 minutes, we walked the neighborhood, Scout proudly prancing at the front of our little parade. But peace is a fragile thing in my world, and apparently, my bladder had to ruin it. Hold on, I'm running to the bathroom, I called, leaving Dad and Scout lounging in the living room. It couldn't have been more than 3 minutes. 3 peaceful, innocent minutes. But when I came back out, well, let's just say no amount of therapy prepared me for the sight of my father halfway through prying a mounted pull-down spice rack out of the kitchen wall with his bare hands. Dad, what on earth are you doing? I swear, he looked more startled that I'd caught him than about the fact that he had his fingers wedged behind my custom cabinetry like some kind of aging action hero. I was just checking to see if it was removable, he stammered, stepping back like he hadn't just tried to redecorate my house by force. It's just, Mara, this stuff is too weird. It's not going to work when the boys move in. I froze. The boys. He waved his hands like he could erase the words from the air. Forget it, honey. Just forget I said anything. Oh, I wasn't about to forget. Because here's the thing. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had ever mentioned Caleb and Max, my nephews, moving in with me. And frankly, the last time I checked, those kids had 2 perfectly healthy, happily married parents. I tried to press him, but all he kept saying was, it's a big house. You've got space for them. Like that somehow explained why he was out here testing the structural integrity of my custom cabinetry with his bare hands. He apologized for the damage, transferred me a hilariously large some via Zelle before I could even blink, and insisted we keep our lunch plans. The rest of the day? Smooth as buttered toast. But every bite of my turkey club tasted like a loaded question. And that's how my housewarming turned into a psychological thriller with a plot hole the size of my kitchen. The problem with a mind like mine is that it doesn't let mysteries sit quietly. It picks them up, rolls them around like a stress ball, then hurls them against the nearest mental wall to see what breaks. And that night, every corner of my brain was plastered with the same impossible headline, when the boys move in. Ethan noticed right away. He's got the sixth sense when it comes to my spirals. While I was silently interrogating the ceiling fan from the couch, he sat next to me and offered one of those perfectly timed reality checks. You're grinding your teeth, he said calmly. flipping through a dog-eared architectural digest. Want to talk about the existential crisis, or should I just hand you a mouthguard and some herbal tea? I stared at him. Do you think I'm crazy? He smirked. Well, you married me, so there's clearly something off. But no, crazy? Never. Spiraling? Absolutely. I shot up off the couch like I just remembered there was a fire in the kitchen. Ethan, he said. He just said it like it was a foregone conclusion. When the boys move in. Who does that? Who just drops something like that and refuses to explain? Ethan closed the magazine and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Babe, your dad's got a long history of doing this kind of thing. Remember the time he insisted we needed a panic room because it's only a matter of time before social order collapses? That was different. I said, pacing. This wasn't some end-of-the-world nonsense. This was about my actual life and my actual house being repurposed for a plan I didn't even know I was a part of. He watched me for a moment, then spoke carefully. Have you considered just calling Jordan? And there it was, the one suggestion I had been actively avoiding. My older brother, Jordan, was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong, even when he did wrong spectacularly. If there was some hidden plan involving me, he'd know about it. And if he didn't, well, that opened up a whole different Pandora's box. After another 2 hours of pacing, I cracked. I called him. Jordan answered like nothing was weird at all. Mara. Hey. You calling to finally admit you're going to foster another dog and just keep it? Jordan, this is serious, I said, my voice already shaking with the weight of all the pin-up confusion. Dad said something today. Something really weird. I launched into the full recap, Frank's home renovation judgment, the DIY demolition attempt, and, of course, the cryptic comment about the boys moving in. Jordan went silent, and not just the normal pause to think silent. I'm talking dead air, phone disconnected levels of silent. Finally, he cleared his throat. Mara, I have no idea what he's talking about. Max and Caleb aren't going anywhere. Their biggest crisis right now is who gets to play the new VR console after homework. And Maggie and I, we're good. Really good. There's nothing happening on this end. I pressed harder, feeling like the room was tilting. Are you sure? There's no secret health thing? No hidden financial issues? You're not thinking of some long-term travel plan where you dump the kids on me for a year? Jordan practically laughed. Dump the kids on you? Mara, you run 2 businesses out of that house, and you and Ethan have a healthcare routine that could rival a NASA mission plan. You think I'd willingly add a pair of sugar-fueled preteens to that mix? That should have calmed me down. Should have, but didn't. Because if Jordan was just as blindsided as me, that left only one other explanation. Jordan, is this some kind of weird dad plan? Jordan sighed so loudly I felt it in my bones. Yeah. I was afraid you were going to say that. He went on to explain that Dad's been different lately. Not in a medical way, no memory lapses or wandering off. Just fixated. Hyper-focused on family legacy and this sudden obsession with having contingency plans for every possible scenario. And get this, Jordan added, lowering his voice even though he was home alone. He's been talking to some life planner. Calls her his strategy coach. I figured it was just another one of his post-retirement hobbies. But now? I'm not so sure. I pinched the bridge of my nose, already feeling a headache blooming. Does this life planner have a name? Delia Grange, Jordan said. Apparently, she's all about preparing families for, I don't know, apocalyptic life shifts? Inheritance drama? He talks about her like she's a financial advisor, therapist, and doomsday prepper rolled into one. That's when it clicked. My dad wasn't just meddling, he was executing a strategy. And based on the way my kitchen wall almost became a casualty of it, I was smack dab in the middle of his master plan. Jordan promised to dig up more information and, in a rare display of sibling solidarity, offered to confront Dad with me if it came to that. I hung up and turned to Ethan, who was already looking at me like he knew what I was about to say. This isn't over, I muttered, collapsing back onto the couch. Ethan handed me a mug of tea without a word. And just like that, my perfectly designed, future-proof house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a chessboard. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure what piece I was. If Dad's house was a fortress of outdated ideas, then mine had become a war room, minus the dramatic lighting and cigar smoke. Ethan sat at the dining table, laptop open, methodically pulling up every scrap of information he could find on Delia Grange, the so-called strategy coach behind my father's descent into parental overreach. This woman has no official certifications, Ethan muttered, his fingers tapping across the keyboard like machine gun fire. No CFP, no social work degree. But man, she's got a marketing presence. Look at this. He turned the screen toward me, and there she was. Delia Grange. Picture every self-help guru you've ever seen. Sharp navy blue suit, blinding white smile, and eyes that practically screamed, "I know your worst fears," and how to monetize them. Her website was a masterpiece of anxiety bait. Are you prepared for life's inevitable crises? The family you protect today secures the legacy of tomorrow. Because being caught unprepared is a failure you can't afford. Ethan scrolled down to her client testimonials, most of which read like thinly veiled success stories about convincing elderly family members to assign power of attorney before their kids even learned to drive. This woman doesn't just sell contingency plans, I said, my voice tightening. She plants them. And apparently, my father was her favorite garden. Jordan called later that afternoon. His voice had that same grim tone he used when we were kids, huddled under the porch during a thunderstorm, trying to figure out if the lightning had struck the old oak out back. I talked to him. Jordan started. Dad's entrenched Mara. He thinks this is all some grand act of responsibility. He said he's protecting the family from our own lack of foresight. And when I asked him why he thinks you need to house my kids, he said, and I'm quoting here, "Mara's the only one with a house designed for future realities." I pinched the bridge of my nose so hard I nearly left a dent. Jordan, I designed my house for me. For Ethan. Not to become the emergency foster system for your kids or anyone else's. Has he seriously been building a whole plan around that? Jordan exhaled slowly. He's convinced there's going to be a moment, some catastrophic event, that'll leave you the only logical option. He wouldn't explain what, exactly. But he keeps saying, "You'll thank me when the time comes." There was only one way to get ahead of this. If Dad trusted Delia Grange so much, I had to see for myself what she was really selling. 2 days later, I became her next potential client. I scheduled a consultation under a fake name, Marie Dalton, an overworked entrepreneur concerned about the future stability of her family. I figured I didn't even have to stretch the truth much for that part. Delia's office was exactly what I expected. Sleek, modern, and intimidatingly cold. Gray walls, minimalist furniture, and the faint scent of lavender, manufactured calm. Delia herself was even more polished in person, her every word landing like a soft-gloved punch. "So, Marie," she began, folding her perfectly manicured hands on the table. "Tell me, what keeps you awake at night?" I almost laughed. "You do, lady. You and the catastrophic mess you've encouraged my father to script into my life." Instead, I played along. "Well, I guess I'm worried about what happens if something unexpected happens to my family. I don't want to be caught off guard." Delia's eyes lit up like she'd just sunk a winning shot in a high-stakes poker game. "Exactly. So many families lack a strong leadership figure willing to make hard decisions before crisis strikes. That's where I come in. I specialize in identifying the most practical assets in a family and ensuring they're prepared to lead when the time comes." Assets. She was talking about people as if we were chess pieces. I almost broke character then and there, but I held it together. "And how do you identify these assets?" I asked, my voice deliberately curious. She leaned forward, her tone lowering like she was sharing state secrets. "It's all about capability and infrastructure. If someone has the physical space, the mental resilience, and the financial savvy, they're the natural choice. Whether they like it or not." My stomach turned. That was me, in my father's mind. The perfect pawn. And what about people's personal boundaries? Their choices? She gave me a thin smile, tilting her head. In times of crisis, choices become luxuries. The question is, would you rather be the one making decisions, or having them made for you? I stood up, unable to stay seated another second. "You're not selling safety," I said, dropping the act. "You're selling fear." And my father bought it wholesale. She didn't even blink. "Fear is just another form of motivation, Miss Caldwell." I left before I said something that would have resulted in a very public scene. Back home, the truth hit me like a wrecking ball. Dad wasn't losing his mind. He was trying to control his legacy before it slipped through his fingers. And Delia Grange? She was just the latest in a long line of people happy to capitalize on his compulsions. But if my father thought I was going to just play along, he had forgotten one very important fact. I'm not a pawn. I'm the architect. And it was time to redesign this entire dysfunctional blueprint before it went. There's a moment in every storm when you stop running for shelter and just stand still. Let the wind whip through your hair. Let the rain soak your clothes. and dare the lightning to hit you. That's exactly where I was, done ducking and dodging. Ready to march straight into the storm's eye, umbrella be damned. Ethan was the one who finally broke the tension at home. Either you confront her, he said, his eyes steady over his morning coffee, or you're going to turn our beautifully renovated kitchen into a crime scene with all the pacing you're doing. He wasn't wrong. The floorboards were practically wearing a path under my feet. So I did what any woman on a mission would do. I found out where Delia Grange was giving her next Family Futures workshop. And then I bought a ticket. Front row. I wasn't going as Marie Dalton this time. No aliases. No disguises. I wanted her, and more importantly, my father, to see exactly who was challenging this little empire of fear they'd built together. The event was held in one of those sterile hotel conference rooms that smelled faintly of industrial carpet cleaner and hopelessness. Rows of perfectly aligned chairs, a high-tech projector screen glowing with ominous phrases like prepare, protect, prevail. The place was full of silver-haired parents and a few uncomfortable-looking adult children who'd clearly been dragged there against their will. I scanned the room, and there he was, Dad, front and center like the teacher's pet he'd always secretly been. Delia took the stage with the confidence of a woman who believed she could outtalk gravity itself. She launched into her usual pitch about the inevitability of family crises, complete with graphs showing rising medical costs, plummeting estate values, and worst-case scenarios that could scare the confidence right out of a Fortune 500 CEO. It was manipulative. It was slick. And it was working. Midway through the presentation, she asked for volunteers to share their future-proofing success stories. Of course, Frank Caldwell stood up. "My daughter," he began, his voice booming like he was giving a State of the Union address. "She's already taken the first steps, designed a home to accommodate every future challenge, built the infrastructure to care for anyone in need. She just doesn't realize yet how ready she is to lead." I felt every eye in that room turn toward me like a wave crashing against a cliff. Delia's eyes sparkled when she spotted me standing in the back. "Is that her?" she asked, the perfect picture of manufactured warmth. "Would you like to come share your experience, Mara?" My heart hammered in my chest, but my feet moved before my brain could catch up. I walked to the front like I owned the room, because in that moment, I did. "Sure," I said, taking the mic from Delia's perfectly manicured hand. "I'd love to." I turned to face the crowd. "My name is Mara Caldwell, and I didn't design my home to become the family fallback plan. I didn't spend months recovering from chronic illness flares and investing every ounce of energy I had into building a life on my terms, just to have someone else write me into a crisis playbook without my permission." The room was dead silent. I designed my home because I deserve to live well, because my husband deserves to live well, and because my life isn't a contingency plan waiting to happen. It's happening right now, and it doesn't include sacrificing my health or my freedom for other people's hypotheticals. I looked directly at my father, who sat frozen in his chair. And let me be crystal clear, being prepared isn't about stockpiling fear. It's about setting healthy boundaries. Boundaries I'm enforcing, starting today. I handed the mic back to Delia, who, credit where it's due, managed to maintain her composure even as her perfectly crafted narrative started unraveling. I turned on my heel and walked out. Didn't wait for applause, didn't wait for questions. Just walked out into the fresh air and took the deepest breath I'd had in weeks. Dad didn't call for 2 days. When he finally did, his voice was smaller. Humbled, almost. "You really meant all that?" he asked quietly. "Yes, Dad. I did. And I'm going to keep meaning it tomorrow, and the day after that." There was a long pause. I didn't realize I was pushing so hard. "Yeah," I said gently. "That's the problem." He didn't apologize. That would have been too much to expect. But he promised to cancel his sessions with Delia and, miracle of miracles, said he was going to talk to Jordan and my other brother about their own responsibilities moving forward. Ethan poured me a glass of wine that night, lifting it in a silent toast. "To boundaries," he said. I clinked my glass against his and smiled. "To living life by design," I replied. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't building walls to keep people out. I was building them to hold my 6 weeks. That's how long it took for the dust to settle after my little public rebellion against Dad's grand legacy plan. 6 glorious weeks without veiled suggestions about my big empty house or unsolicited lectures on what responsible daughters do. And then, the invitation arrived. A family barbecue. Classic dad move. Wave the white flag and disguise it under a heaping plate of overcooked burgers and force small talk. Ethan found the invitation tucked under the door like it was some kind of peace treaty slid across enemy lines. Do we even own appropriate barbecue attire for this kind of thing? He asked, arching a brow. I smirked. I'm thinking full battle regalia. Emotional armor, sarcasm shield, and a strong no-nonsense spear. Excellent, he grinned. I'll grab the sunglasses and dramatic slow-motion exit playlist. The day of the barbecue was one of those rare summer afternoons where the sun wasn't trying to kill you, but the humidity made it clear it had plans later. Dad's backyard looked exactly the same as it had since 1998. The rusty swing set leaned at a dangerous angle, the old grill puffed out sad little clouds of charcoal smoke, and the same crooked folding table held up an army of soda cans sweating through their cardboard box armor. Jordan was already there, flipping burgers like he was running for mayor. My younger brother, Ryan, was busy explaining for the third time why his latest startup didn't actually require a product to exist yet. Dad stood by the patio with a drink in his hand, watching me approach like I was the final boss in a video game he hadn't trained for. And then, something incredible happened. He smiled. Not the tight, performative grin he usually wore at family functions. A real one. Mara, he said, voice steady but softer than usual. Glad you're here. I crossed my arms, not quite ready to believe the détente was real. Well, you know me. Always prepared. He chuckled at that, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were standing on neutral ground. The real test came later, when he called everyone together for his customary mid-barbecue toast. Normally, these were long-winded speeches about family duty and the importance of tradition. I braced myself for impact. But this time, Dad cleared his throat and raised his glass with a simple statement. To building lives we're proud of on our own terms. Jordan glanced at me, eyebrows raised. Ethan shot me a knowing smile. And that's when I realized the old man had actually heard me. After the toast, the conversations turned lighter. No backhanded comments. No hidden agendas. Just genuine, if slightly awkward, attempts at treating me like, well, an adult making her own choices. As the sun dipped low and the cicadas started their nightly chorus, Dad approached me one last time. You know, your mother always wanted a garden like yours, he said, nodding toward the photos I'd shown earlier of the rooftop space Ethan had secretly finished for me. I smiled. She would have loved it. It's a good place to breathe. Dad hesitated. You think, maybe you'd show me sometime? That one caught me off guard. But in the best way. Yeah, Dad. I think I'd like that. Back home that night, Ethan and I sat under the string lights of our rooftop garden, Scout curled at our feet. You think this is the happy ending? I asked, watching the sky shift from blue to velvet. Ethan tilted his head. Nope. I think it's the beginning where you finally start living for yourself. And sitting there, the warm glow of the house behind me, the open sky above me, I realized. This wasn't a story about what I'd built for others. It was about what I'd finally built. 6 months later, the house felt settled. Like the dust of old expectations had finally stopped swirling in the corners. The walls held no more secrets, only the quiet hum of a life designed with intention. And me? I wasn't just living in this house anymore. I was thriving in it. The rooftop garden had become my favorite place in the world. Ethan and I spent evenings there sipping tea, Scout stretched out beside us like a tiny, overworked security guard. The garden wasn't massive, but it was perfect, a tangle of wildflowers and herbs, string lights twinkling overhead, and one ridiculously stubborn tomato plant that refused to die no matter how badly we neglected it. And then, out of the blue, Dad called. Not a cryptic message. Not a transfer of funds attached to some unspoken guilt trip. Just a simple question. Hey, kiddo, mind if I come see that garden? I stared at the phone for a full minute before answering. Yeah, Dad. I like that. He arrived the next day, carrying a bag of gardening gloves and a pair of pruning shears so shiny they probably still had a price tag dangling from them. He stood at the entrance to the rooftop space, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. It's peaceful up here, he admitted, his voice low, almost reverent. It's where I remember to breathe, I said quietly. We didn't talk much as we worked side by side, him pruning a stubborn rosemary bush, me fussing over that one rebellious tomato plant. But in that silence, something settled between us. An understanding, wordless and solid as the bricks under our feet. At one point, Dad sat back on the bench Ethan had built from reclaimed wood. He rubbed his hands together and stared out at the horizon. You know, he began, I spent my whole life thinking that protecting the people I love meant building walls for them. Strong ones. Tall ones. Walls that could withstand anything. He glanced at me, a faint, almost sad smile tugging at his mouth. But you went and built a house without walls at all. At least not the kind I ever understood. And somehow, you're the strongest one of all of us. For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened in that frustrating way it does when your emotions show up uninvited to the conversation. This house isn't about walls, Dad, I said when I finally found my voice. It's about space. Space to breathe. Space to choose. Space to live on my own terms. He nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the grain of the old bench. I guess I'm finally starting to understand that. We sat there until the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the sky in streaks of gold and lavender. And for the first time in my life, my father didn't offer advice. He didn't try to fix anything. He just sat with me. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Jordan called to say the boys, Caleb and Max, wanted to visit me. Not because anyone was plotting to move them in. Just because they'd seen photos of the garden and wanted to experience Aunt Mara's magic house for themselves. This time, the visit was on my terms. They came for the weekend. 2 days of wild storytelling, rooftop picnics, and me teaching them how to plant their very first herb pots, basil for Caleb, mint for Max. At one point, Caleb looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. Aunt Mara, how come your house is so different? I crouched down beside him, brushing a smudge of soil off his cheek. Because, kiddo, I said, smiling. Different is where we grow best. And right there, in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a home. It wasn't a fallback plan or a crisis shelter. It was a living, breathing testament to what happens when you stop building walls to keep the world out and start building doorways to let the right things in. The house wasn't built for the life everyone expected me to live. It was built for the life I chose. And as the boys raced off down the hall, their laughter echoing through the house I had crafted with my own 2 hands, I stood in the doorway and let the moment settle deep in my bones. The house wasn't just built to last, it was built to